Laughter came first, sharp, careless, echoing across the marble floor like it belonged there more than she did. "I just want to see my balance," she said softly, clutching the strap of her worn handbag. The millionaire laughed again. And then the screen lit up. Grace Miller had learned to speak quietly. Life had taught her that loud hopes often invited disappointment. She stood at the private bank counter, shoulders slightly hunched, eyes fixed on the glass separating her from a world that had never truly opened its doors to her. Behind her, men in tailored suits spoke confidently about investments and portfolios, their voices smooth with certainty. Grace felt like a misplaced note in a song that wasn't written for her. Across the counter stood Andrew Whitmore, real estate tycoon, media favorite, and a man who measured time in profits and people in usefulness. He was there to finalize a seven-figure transfer, surrounded by advisors and an air of importance that bent the room toward him. When Grace approached the neighboring counter, Andrew barely noticed her, until she spoke. "I just want to see my balance," she repeated to the teller, apologetic for even asking. Andrew glanced sideways. Her shoes were scuffed. Her coat was too thin for winter. He smirked, leaning toward his assistant. "Balance," he whispered loudly enough to be heard. "Must be checking if there's enough for lunch." A few people chuckled. Grace felt her face burn, but she didn't turn around. She had endured worse, far worse, than laughter from strangers. The teller, a young man named Daniel, hesitated. "Of course, ma'am. May I see your card?" Grace handed it over with careful hands. The card was old, edges faded, her name printed in plain letters, Grace Evelyn Miller. As Daniel typed, Andrew leaned back, arms crossed, clearly entertained. "You know," he said casually, "banks like this usually have a minimum balance requirement." Grace finally looked at him. Her eyes were calm, tired, but steady. "I know," she replied. "I've been coming here for years." That only made Andrew laugh harder. Daniel's fingers froze on the keyboard. His eyes widened. He blinked once, then again. "Sir," Daniel said, his voice tight, directed not at Grace, but at Andrew. Andrew waved him off. "Relax, I'm sure it's a mistake." Daniel swallowed. It's not." Grace frowned slightly. "Is something wrong?" Daniel turned the screen toward her, and unintentionally toward Andrew. The laughter stopped. Andrew's breath caught in his throat. On the screen were numbers, long, quiet numbers that didn't need to shout to command respect. Commas lined up neatly. The balance displayed more wealth than Andrew had transferred in his entire career that year. Andrew leaned forward, squinting. That can't be right." Grace stared at the screen, her lips trembling. "Oh," she whispered, "it finally came through." The room fell silent. Grace had not always been poor. She had not always worn second-hand coats or counted coins before buying bread. There was a time, long before this bank, long before the laughter, when her life had been full of promise. She grew up in a small Christian home in Ohio, raised by parents who believed deeply in kindness, honesty, and faith. Her father, Thomas Miller, was a schoolteacher who taught history not as dates, but as stories of choices. Her mother, Ruth, worked nights as a nurse and spent mornings teaching Grace that true wealth was measured by what you gave away. Grace married young. Her husband, Samuel Miller, was a gentle man with big dreams and rough hands from years of hard work. Together, they started a small logistics company, nothing flashy, just reliable service and honest contracts. They reinvested every dollar, trusted people too easily, and prayed often. Then Samuel got sick. Cancer doesn't care about dreams or prayers. It came fast and ruthless. Medical bills piled up. Contracts fell through. Grace sold their house to keep the company afloat. When Samuel passed away, she buried him with borrowed money and a heart shattered beyond repair. What few people knew was that, before Samuel died, he had quietly made one decision that would change everything. He had invested, not in stocks or real estate, but in people. Samuel believed in supporting struggling startups run by honest people, small loans, quiet partnerships, no contracts that demanded control, just trust. Grace had begged him to stop. "We need that money," she had cried. He smiled weakly from his hospital bed. "If I don't believe in people now," he said, "then I never showed God I understood his gifts." After his death, Grace thought all that money was gone. She never checked. She never wanted to know. Survival became her only goal. Years passed. She worked as a cleaner, a caregiver, a night receptionist at a church shelter. People saw her as invisible, useful, but forgettable. Andrew Whitmore would have seen her the same way had the screen not spoken for her. Back in the bank, Andrew straightened slowly, his confidence evaporating. "That account," he said carefully, "belongs to you." Grace nodded, "Yes." "How?" His voice was no longer mocking, only stunned. Grace met his eyes. "My husband believed in people before they were successful." Andrew said nothing. Daniel cleared his throat. "Ma'am, the transfer from Whitfield Tech finalized this morning, along with 3 other acquisitions." He smiled, unable to hide his awe. "Your total assets now place you among our top private clients." Andrew felt something unfamiliar tighten in his chest. Embarrassment. For the first time in years, money did not make him the most powerful person in the room. Grace turned away from the screen. "Thank you," she said simply. "That's all I needed." As she gathered her bag, Andrew spoke. "Mrs. Miller, Grace." She paused. "I owe you an apology," he said, his voice low. "I laughed because I assumed I was wrong." Grace studied him for a moment. Then she smiled, not triumphantly, not bitterly, but kindly. "You weren't laughing at me," she said. "You were laughing at a story you thought you understood." Andrew nodded, humbled. "What will you do now?" he asked. Grace thought of Samuel, of her parents, of the shelter where she worked nights, of all the people still whispering their needs in rooms full of laughter. "I'll keep believing in people," she said, "just like my husband did." And with that, she walked out, leaving behind a millionaire who had just learned the true cost of arrogance. The story spread quietly at first. No headlines, no interviews. Grace declined them all. Instead, she did something far more radical. She gave. She paid off medical debts anonymously, funded church shelters, invested in small businesses run by single parents and veterans. She returned to the same job she'd worked before, not because she needed the money, but because she wanted to stay human. Andrew Whitmore watched from a distance. Months later, he requested a meeting. "I want to invest with you," he said, "but differently, the way your husband did." Grace considered him carefully. "Then you'll need to learn to listen first." Andrew smiled. "I'm ready." The screen had shown numbers, but what truly changed that day was not a balance. It was a heart. Because wealth revealed in silence is powerful, but humility learned too late is priceless. And sometimes, the loudest lesson comes from the quietest voice saying, "I just want to see my balance."